Joining me right now, Kerry Eleveld of Daily Kos, who comes on the program quite often and has been digging into some of what we've learned about what the January 6th committee, the select committee investigating, of course, the insurrection, has done. Yesterday, Liz Cheney spoke to Politico, dropped a bombshell revealing that they had investigated and conducted over 150 interviews with a whole range of people. And Kerry joins me to talk about it. Welcome back to the program, Kerry.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
I see.
Good to hear it.
I think that the Democrats' vote is off again, or is it back on again, or off again? I don't know. I just saw
Are you talking about the quote unquote Biff and BBB?
Yes. I saw that. I just reported that no, they weren't moving forward with the vote, and then I saw something flash across my screen that said Pelosi, we will move ahead with the vote. So I don't know. I don't know.
It is. I mean, I think it's fair to say that, you know, moving this forward is a little bit of a cluster F, you know, right now. Trying to be family friendly here. I don't know who listens, but anyway, I don't want to alarm your readers, or your listeners with an F bomb. But I ultimately think that they are going to get both of these bills. I honestly believe it. And so, you know, whatever pains we're going through right now, I'm just trying to kind of muddle through until we get to a point where we know what we actually got and we can figure out how to sell that to the American people. So,
exactly.
Anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, you wrote about imagining how Kevin McCarthy, the House Minority Leader, reacted when he saw the news that Liz Cheney and the Select Committee had interviewed over 150 people. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, sometimes you just have to amuse yourself with thinking, because Kevin McCarthy, he's the GOP minority leader in the House, of course. He is just dying. He's so desperate to become the majority leader. And it's possible that he will become the House majority leader. But, you know, he has done nothing but lie to the American people. So it's going to be a dismal reality because he will be nothing but just a Trump. You know, he's just a Trump, like, do whatever Trump wants. He'll just be Trump's, like, right-hand person, and whatever Trump wants. It'll be like having Trump as speaker. It's just, you know, McCarthy's going to be the figurehead. So anyway, I do enjoy this thing going on between Liz Cheney and McCarthy. I mean, Liz Cheney, I think, believes in her heart of hearts that Kevin McCarthy, having lied to the American people, is, you know, about January 6th, about the, you know, 2020 election and fraud in the 2020 election, which is completely baseless, is a menace and would be a menace as speaker. And I'm no fan, as I'm sure you are not, and most of your listeners are not, a big fan of Liz Cheney. In fact, I agree with her. I mean, I disagree with her on like 99.9% of things. But one thing I can agree with her on is that this January 6th commission has to get it done. I mean, they have to get the truth out, because as soon as if Republicans take over, if they win next November and then they take over in January, they are going to shut this down, right? So, you know, what we find with this, you know, this sort of bomb dropped by Cheney is that while everybody's talking about, oh, they haven't gotten Bannon to testify and there's a criminal referral for him, DOJ isn't acting on it yet, and there's several other sort of higher up people in Trump's White House and administration that they want to talk to, they have been burning through witnesses. And I was thinking about what it would be like for Kevin McCarthy, who kind of thinks, you know, oh, this thing's stumbling along and maybe they're not getting much. And, you know, I think it's pretty clear at this point, is really desperate for the truth not to come out about any of what happened and any connections between the Republican Party, some GOP congressional members, and Trump's involvement in potentially, stoking a coup, right? An attack on the U.S. government. He's so desperate for none of that information to come out. Mitch McConnell is too, by the way. But anyway, I just enjoyed the thought of like Kevin McCarthy sitting there, having his morning coffee and then, just seeing the news drop that the January 6th Commission has interviewed more than 150 people. I mean, it's just like spitting up his coffee all over himself. I don't know.
And because they've interviewed a lot of people who we know have information. They're people who either because they really finally got a conscience or they're worried about how it's going to affect them. They're people who were on the inside. They were, former Trump officials. There's the White House aide communications person, Alyssa Farah. There's former Trump Department of Justice officials, Jeffrey Clark. He spoke today. He was subpoenaed and he spoke today. And then Richard Donahue, who I think he voluntarily went, as well as with Jeffrey Rosen, the former acting attorney general. So they are probably spilling all kinds of information.
Right. And I think right, exactly. I mean, there's different motivations. I mean, Steve Bannon is kind of a special issue, right? He has the backing of a billionaire somewhere in China. I think he can probably accrue as many legal fees as possible and would be able to pay them off without a problem because he's constantly on the grift. And he wants nothing more than media attention and to be seen as be celebrated as a pro-Trump martyr. So if he had to spend some days in jail, he would, God knows he looks the part, right? So he's not the same as some of these other people, right? There's a lot of people who, first of all, there's some people like you mentioned, like Jeffrey Rosen, who was the acting attorney general, who did right and who pushed back against Trump just trying to get them to lie about them finding, the DOJ finding fraud. And then there's some people also who kind of stuck by Trump in the White House for the most part. But, they're lower down people. They don't have the financial backing. They don't want to have a bunch of legal fees. They probably don't want to lie about what happened. They may anticipate wanting to have a future. They're young, right? And some people place their bets on Trump, and other people are placing their bets on a post-Trump era. And so, there's lots, obviously, as we know now, lots of people coming forward. And on top of that, you've got this, Trump going to court to try and stop this trove of information from the National Archives being sent to the Congressional Committee. And that hearing happened yesterday, and it's really a stall tactic. I mean, they're just trying to stall this out as far as they can. It's an exceedingly weak executive privilege claim because Biden really has the power. There's only one executive at a time, and Biden has the power to decide what it has, an executive privilege claim over it. So Trump's lawyers were in court yesterday trying to block and convince a judge that they had a claim to blocking the National Archivist from sending this information over to the Congressional Committee, and it didn't go well for them. It did not go particularly well, and so you're seeing a situation where, sure, but maybe you don't get Bannon, maybe you don't get Mark Meadows, or maybe you do. I don't know, but I don't think they're going to get Bannon. But you might start to see if, for instance, DOJ went forward with actually arresting Bannon and going through the paces of a criminal contempt charge. You might see someone like Meadows think twice about what he was going to do. The former chief of staff for Trump, who really was critical and in on all of the machinations around January 6th and what was happening that day in the White House and the lead up to it and the aftermath. So anyway, but Trump is trying to block this stuff from coming. It looks like it's going to get to the Congressional Committee. They're going to have, that includes phone logs, your calendar events and things like that. and some internal communications, right, with the within the between the aides and things like that. So this is all critical information. And,
And it's like all he's doing is telegraphing his guilt by trying to stop this information. I mean, it's only information. It's information from that day that was being transmitted back and forth. Why does he not want anybody to see that?
Yeah. I don't know how, I mean, there might have been some people trying to convince him to call off the dogs when, when the Capitol was getting ransacked, I mean, the amount of time between when the rioters breached the Capitol and when Trump finally came out with a really soft sort of "I love you," statement.
You're
but,
great people. You're good people.
You're great people. But maybe we shouldn't do this. And then he had to kind of come back and do another one because the first one was so weak. I mean, this is crazy stuff. This is the president of the United States refusing to try to stop what is a coup attempt, what is a violent coup attempt on the U.S. government. And, I mean, it's so obvious by now. But I think that this committee seems to be, taking no prisoners, to use a phrase, right? They are moving forward. They're proceeding apace. It's very fast. I think, they've got the benefit of an administration that has decided that they're prioritizing the truth coming out over some sort of institutional, protect the White House type mentality, which is oftentimes what you get with even a subsequent chief executive. So, and
we've even got these two. We've got the two sources Rolling Stone reported on, who, according to Rolling Stone, are speaking to the committee, who say they had dozens of planning meetings with members of Congress and with people in the White House, too. So, and these are people who were organizing.
Right. This committee is going to come up with a bombshell of a report. I feel certain about it. It's going to be, the more we learn, the question is to some extent how accessible and how well it's going to be sort of relayed to the American people so that they can absorb it. We know there's a third of Americans. There's, at least a third there's probably 33% of the population that's so bought into Trump at this point that they won't believe anything and all they believe are conspiracy theories and right-wing media, right? But there's about 2/3 of the population that need to hear about the connections. And I also wonder, one question is how many people end up running afoul of the law, and how aggressive does the DOJ get? I'm personally hoping, and I think there's, certainly a case for this, that if this federal judge rejects Trump's executive privilege claim, then Bannon's executive privilege claim, which was practically laughable to begin with because he wasn't even an administration official when all of this went on, that just completely falls apart entirely if it already wasn't just a joke. And at that point, I am hoping that the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland, because even though this has been referred to a U.S. attorney, there is undoubtedly the highest levels of officials in DOJ making decision about whether to act on this criminal contempt charge. And I am hoping that they will move forward quickly with that, because it will also send a message. I mean, that congressional committee subpoenas don't have near as much power if the Department of Justice isn't going to move forward with the criminal contempt complaint against Steve Bannon. They must do it. They must do it. So anyway, that we're going to be following certainly as it goes. I wanted to ask you as well about something else you wrote about, the results of a new poll from the Public Religion Research Institute that shows
the big lie has radicalized a huge portion of the country to believe that violence is the best way forward. And we have people like Madison Cawthorn telling mothers, raise your children to be monsters. We've had references to guns and bloodshed. Talk a little bit about the polls finding and where you think it says we're going as a nation.
Well, I think this is where we start to see how corrosive Trump's big lie has been, right? I mean, what we know is, for instance, there was an NBC poll earlier this week that I just happened to be writing up right now, and I'll get back to the PRI poll in just a second. But it found that, last year, Republican voters were kind of on a par with everybody else in saying that, in believing that their vote would be counted last October, right? And it's 84% of Republicans said that they were confident of that. But then by this year, just 41% of Republican voters said that they're confident that their vote would be counted, right? So there's just been this amazing plummet in trust in U.S. elections. And what that has bred is, if you don't trust elections to be fair, right, then what is the alternative? And the alternative is violence, right? The alternative is not trying to participate more or better in the system. It's deciding the system is useless and, and cannot be trusted. And the only thing then is, okay, what about violence? And we heard that questioner at a recent event that I'm sure you covered with is it Charlie Savage? And the questioner said, when do we get to use the guns, right? And so what we find in this PRI poll is that 30% of Republicans agreed that, quote unquote, true American patriots might have to resort to violence in order to save the country. And that sentiment was particularly high among respondents who believe 2020 was stolen from Trump. So 30% of Republicans believe that, but 39% of the cohort that believes that believes the election was stolen, 39% of that cohort is endorsing potential violence, right? So the more likely you are to believe it is that the election, that 2020 was stolen, the more likely you are to be veering towards, using violence as a means of overturning what you think is illegitimate. And it's scary. That's a domestic terror threat, right? That's a direct domestic terror threat.
Well, and think about the confluence of messages coming at these people and the perfect storm, if you will. Just 2 days ago, the Supreme Court of the United States discussed just allowing everyone to carry a gun anywhere, whenever they want, and allowing states, not allowing states to have laws against that. And, you should be able to conceal carry in the subway if you need to. Right.
And, and on top of that, it's just that Trump and his henchmen just keep pushing this. So ahead of the Virginia election, which we know by now, Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, won, right? And we don't have people in the streets right now trying to overturn that election. Democrats, of course, are doing what Democrats are doing and flogging themselves, right? But ahead of every election now, every kind of major national election, Republicans, people like Newt Gingrich and Trump and Steve Bannon go out and say this election is going to be stolen. It's going to be illegitimate.
Oh yeah, and they're saying it about New Jersey.
They'll say it right. They say it right. Exactly. They say it in every election unless their person wins, in which case they're like, no, it was perfect, it's just fine. So, there was higher turnout than ever. It was record turnout in Virginia. And because Republicans won, no one's out there crowing about how many dead people voted. You know what I mean? So,
right, or attacking early voting or anything like that, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. So basically, what they are going to do is keep trumpeting this and keep putting this in people's minds until what you're talking about, a perfect storm happens. And I don't know when that perfect storm is going to come. That perfect storm, and to some extent, happened on January 6th. It just failed. But it could come again, and that's what they're hoping for.
Kerry, always great to speak with you. Really just love checking in with you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks to you and your listeners.
Kerry Eleveld, read her work at Daily Kos. She writes there. And, of course, at Kerry Eleveld, Eleveld on Twitter. We're back in a couple of minutes.
Michelangelo Signorile on Sirius XM.